And I know it could be worse. I know I could be working longer, but like I literally get off, it's pitch black. Like I don't have energy. How do you have friends? Like how do you have time to like meet like a guy? I don't know. Like how do you have time for like dating? Like I don't have time for anything, and I'm like so stressed out.
60% in this study, and there's other ones, of employers believe that Gen Z workers are unprepared for the workforce. And so when it comes to hiring and people they're interviewing, they're seeing, okay, it doesn't seem like they're ready for what this job requires, or even what job, like having a job, what is required.
Let me start today's podcast out with a little disclaimer, and here it is. Erin loves Gen Z. She does love Gen Z, but throughout this episode, you're going to experience a level of anger and rage and disappointment and frustration from Erin that maybe you haven't heard before, because she's fired up. Erin, you're fired up because you've been reading some stuff about Gen Z and you're mad.
I'm not mad.
Don't laugh to disguise your anger right now.
I'm sad for a whole generation of people who happen to be our children. Well, actually, most of our children. One of them's a millennial. The rest are Gen Zers. So these are our own
one
children
millennial and 4 Gen
that
Zers.
you're talking about. And I'm not raging after our children.
Well, because
although after all this reading, I do have a few lectures in mind.
Yeah, and because you're raging, and 4 of our kids are Gen Zers, I really, that disclaimer was for our kids personally, so that when they hear this, they don't think mom hates me. Okay.
No.
So, but no, we just recently, there's been some actually social media videos that have come from Gen Zers who essentially the videos have been complaints about kind of modern work life. In fact, why don't we play one of those videos right now and listen to this Gen Zer talk about her struggles with work.
I know I'm probably just being so dramatic and annoying, but this is my first job, like my first 9-to-5 job after college, and I'm in person, and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me forever to get there. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, duh! If I was able to walk to work, and it'd be fine, but I'm not. So it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30, and I don't get home till, like, 6:15 earliest, and then, like, I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset. Oh my God. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just like the 9-to-5 schedule in general is crazy. Being in the office 9-to-5, like if it was remote, you get off at 5 and you're home and everything's fine. But like I'm not home. It takes me long to get home, and like people that drive to the office, like you don't get off at 5. And I know it could be worse. I know I could be working longer, but like I literally get off, it's pitch black. Like I don't have energy. How do you have friends? Like how do you have time to like meet like a guy? I don't know. Like how do you have time for like dating? Like I don't have time for anything, and I'm like so stressed out. And I'm also getting my period, so that's why I'm all emotional. But like, am I so dramatic? It's fine.
Okay, so first thing I want to say about this video in particular is this is one of several videos on social media, but this one kind of went viral.
Yeah.
And this, I would say, this poor girl was attacked pretty brutally. Like she's been made fun of and mocked. We have no intention to do that. Our intention of playing it was to give you a taste of what's been going on in the culture, social media wise, but also in articles and studies on this topic of Generation Z and work. And so what we want to do is talk about the ideas that she holds and what are ideas are underneath that, kind of what worldview is coming out through this.
Yeah. And I think that it's always a good opportunity when we see something like this to, number one, kind of measure our first reaction, because social media fosters in us this kind of outrage, this emotional reactions that may not actually be consistent with a Christian worldview, right? This is, I mean, the video we just watched and heard is this young gal is an image bearer, right? Who has inherent dignity and worth and needs to be treated as such. So we want to make sure that we are the kind of people that are living consistently with our worldview, and that we don't just pile on.
Yeah.
We don't mock this.
That's the nature of it, right? It kind of impersonalizes. So we watch this video. Now, if she were sitting in front of us, we all know we would react different than just watching that. Because the first time I saw that, I was like, are you kidding? And I went into what we're going to talk about.
I think that's when you came to me and you confessed. No. And we had a time of prayer for your sins.
No, but of course, I was free to react however I wanted to. Now, if she was sitting in front of me and said all of that,
you wouldn't have said, are you kidding me?
I would not have started with, are you kidding me? And so that's what this does to us, right?
Yeah.
You're allowed to just react however you want, because no one's watching you. We're all just watching her, and then we get to react.
Yeah. So we want to deal with the ideas, right? We want to kind of evaluate this biblically. We want to see what this might reveal about the mindset of our kids and the culture surrounding them. Because in one sense, I think, we may express some frustration with a young person saying this, but a question that we have to ask ourselves is, well, where is she getting this from? Where has she gotten her views about work and life in general from?
Yeah.
And this is where we adults have got to take a look in the mirror and say, okay, what is it that we are passing down to our kids in terms of their values and something like a work ethic?
Yeah. Because it turns out this gal is not alone, and she's not an outlier. It turns out from some of the articles we're going to talk about, this is actually something that Generation Z is struggling with.
Yeah, and so these videos, there's been a number of them. They've kind of created a response, and there's an article entitled, "Is Gen Z Unprepared for the Workforce? Experts Weigh In." And there's been discussion now from the experts, whoever they are, psychologists or business leaders or employers, on kind of Gen Z and work ethic. Yeah.
So this article we found on Fox Business website, and so they cover a variety of different studies and talk to different experts about the issue. And
we'll put the link in the description.
Okay, yeah. And so basically it starts out by saying that employers are now almost avoiding, or in some cases they are actually avoiding hiring Gen Z. And then it unpacks why, saying that 60% in this study, and there's other ones, of employers believe that Gen Z workers are unprepared for the workforce. And so when it comes to hiring and people they're interviewing, they're seeing, okay, it doesn't seem like they're ready for what this job requires, or even what job, like having a job, what is required.
Well, and does the article talk about how they're unprepared?
It does. So part of it, they say, maybe some of this is just kind of the life stage, and probably they're trying to remind us, people who have been working now, we've been out of school and we've been working, that, hey, remember, we used to be this age too. And whenever you first start something, it can be difficult because it's different than what you've been doing. But it also talks about this study that was done just in December of 2023, that over half of employers, they surveyed over 800 employers, thought that Gen Zers were unprepared for the workforce and displayed unprofessional behavior during the job interview. And this is what I thought was really interesting. So they go into just asking employers about doing interviews with Gen Zers and what they've noticed. And so overwhelmingly, they talked about they criticized Gen Zers in something as simple as failing to maintain eye contact. And so they're noticing, this wasn't just one or two of these young people. They're seeing a pattern that Generation Z have a hard time keeping eye contact.
Now, why do you think that might be?
Yeah. Oh, you're asking the listener?
Well, yeah, I'm asking the listeners,
Yeah.
and I'm asking you.
Well, it seems obvious to me. Like, this is the technology generation.
That's right. Yeah.
And so a lot of the conversations they have is through text. And so you don't have to sit and have a conversation with someone.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not accustomed to having face-to-face conversations, looking each other in the eye. Your eyes are always diverted to a screen.
Yes.
And this is just one of the millions of unintended consequences of raising a generation on screens.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it come into something like a job interview. Now, just to clarify, Gen Z, we're talking about those kids who were born in the mid to late 90s and go to kind of the early 2010s. So we're talking basically, maybe 10 to 26 years of age, somewhere in that range. So this is our kids, right? I mean, I would say the vast majority of people who are listening, we've got Gen Z kids. And even if you've got younger ones, this is an important discussion to have. If your kids are 2, 3, 4, 5, this is something important to think about because the foundation for all that we're going to be talking about starts way back then.
Yes. Hey everyone, we want to let you know about a special offer we're doing here at Maven in the month of February.
Maybe you've heard of the deconstruction movement. This is where ex-evangelicals, ex-Christians who are social media influencers, who are maybe prominent Christians who have left the faith, are now encouraging young people to deconstruct. And they don't mean just ask your questions or explore your doubts. Deconstruction is a destructive movement.
So there's a new resource out this month that we want to get into your hands. It's called The Deconstruction of Christianity, what it is, why it's destructive, and how to respond. It's written by our friends Elisa Childers and Tim Barnett, and it's a great resource to help those of us who want to know what's going on and be equipped on how to have conversations about it.
So here's the offer. This month, in the month of February, if you become a monthly supporter of Maven for $25 or more per month, we're going to get this book into your hands. And we're going to give you about a month to read it, because then the second part of our offer is a special exclusive 2-week webinar with the authors, with Elisa and Tim. And the very first webinar in March, Tim is going to talk about deconstruction, tell us more about what it is, what to watch for, and why it's so destructive. And then in the second week, Elisa is going to talk to us about what we can do. How can we navigate deconstruction in doubt with our own kids and with our own family members? So that's going to be an exclusive 2-week webinar for those who sign up to become monthly supporters of Maven in the month of February. So we want to encourage you, sign up, become a supporter, and let us equip you with the Deconstruction of Christianity book and 2-week webinar.
So this simple skill of eye contact. And I think about just as we've raised our kids, and we've talked about the issue of technology and how do we manage that. And we've done several podcasts on the topic of technology. But this is why, we trained our kids when they did get phones, that there were times to put the phone down. And I would jokingly say to them, we're going to be around humans, so we're going to put our phones down and look at the humans that we're with. But this is that eye contact thing. And there were times that we have said to our kids, this isn't a conversation to be had over text. This is something we need to talk about face to face in person. Or this is something you should talk about with this person face to face. Do not do it over text.
Yeah. There were many text arguments you had with the kids I had to break up. And I had to bring us face to face.
Whatever. I mean, I think I've been tempted, even with you through the years now that we have cell phones. I mean, honestly, like sometimes I don't want to say I'm upset with you. It's easier to send a text.
Wait, you've gotten upset with me?
It is easier to send a text and say, I was really irritated when you did that. And so even with us, we have to, I mean, there's of course times
Wait, didn't you just do that yesterday?
There is of course times to just text, hey, I'm feeling upset, whatever. Can we talk about this later? But we all can fall into this, right? So we're not Gen Z, but we can do this too. But this is what has been normal to them for basically their whole lives, that you have conversation through text. So of course, maintaining eye contact in a conversation, of course that's going to happen. And also it talked about some other common things with Gen Z besides maintaining eye contact. So in interviews, half of the employers polled said that Gen Zers asked for unreasonable compensation, and that almost 50% of Gen Zers that showed up for interviews were dressed inappropriately. That is interesting, and I would love to talk about that too. Dressing inappropriate. And I'm assuming it's not just about modesty and girls. I think it's bigger than dressing inappropriately for an interview. Probably means they came dressed down.
Oh yeah,
like yes.
Yeah, I think it's the gender's probably irrelevant here. It's a guy showing up with ripped jeans and a t-shirt for a job interview.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just didn't want people to think, we say dress inappropriate, and a lot of times we go to immodesty. And then the last one that I wanted to highlight is that one in five of the employers surveyed said that they had Gen Z candidates for jobs show up with a parent during a job interview. And this one...
repeat that number?
So 1 in 5 employers said that they experienced... So this wasn't a huge percentage.
Yeah.
But 1 out of the 5 of the over 800 they talked to said that they had adult Gen Zers show up for jobs with their parents,
their
job interviews with their parents.
Yeah, wow. And that one, I mean, I would say to a lot of us, that's unimaginable. I could never imagine accompanying one of our kids to a job interview. And of course, that speaks more to the parents and the issues with the adult and the parent.
Oh, absolutely. Because if one of our adult kids said, Mom, could you go to the interview with me? I would be like... You'd
come unglued.
No.
Okay, you'd come unglued. You would probably start swinging away, and then you'd settle down and talk to them rationally.
I would first say, I would start with a question like we talk about a lot in this podcast. Honey, why would you want me to do that? Now, if their leg was broken and they needed me to drive them there, then I would drive them. If their limbs
and
were
drop
unusable,
them off.
I would drive them and drop them. Maybe I would push them in a wheelchair into the building. I would not go into the You couldn't. Our children don't have enough money to pay me to do something like that. Like that would be outside of the realm of possibilities.
I could be paid on that one. I could be bought. I'm willing to sacrifice various principles for a certain amount of money.
What's going on with parents where they would go with their adult children to a job interview unless there were really crazy circumstances? Yeah. And this is what we've talked about before, that our friends, we have several friends who are college professors, and they have talked about more and more having parents get involved with their children who are adults missing class or missing an assignment or whatever. So
Yeah. And just a word to parents who might be, maybe you are a little sympathetic to that. I guess I want to just give you a stern word, a word of love, but a stern word that I think will harm your kid. Because part of our goal as parents, as much as we may, not like this part of the job, but it's to raise up young men and women, to raise adults and to let go of them and send them out into the world and to have them be independent of us. There is a healthy independence that we want to develop in our kids. And by overprotecting, by coddling, we actually do harm to them emotionally and spiritually. And so it would be if you feel some sympathy, like, oh, I might be willing to go to my kid's interview. I'd say that is actually a red flag, and that you might want to think, why would I feel that way? Why would I think that way?
Because our job is not to remove every obstacle or struggle or difficult thing for our children, especially as they're getting older and becoming adults and figuring out their identity.
Yeah.
Struggle is part of figuring that out.
Well, and that's where I think, an article like this, and obviously not just the article, but the current cultural moment where this is happening, it says something about us and how we are raising our kids. And it says something about our view of child rearing and parenting and what the goals should be. And so it's good to spend some time like we're doing right now and kind of putting our finger in the water, so to speak, getting the temperature of the water, getting the temperature of the culture. But this speaks to how we as parents largely, right? Because parents have the primary responsibility to raise their kids. We as parents have not done a good job in preparing Gen Zers for the workforce. We have not given them a proper view of work, and we have not prepared them to do something as simple as an interview. Now, and I think I always think there's usually multiple factors that flow into these things. Like if we say, okay, what's the cause of this? Well, parenting would certainly be one of those causes, and we might say it's a primary cause. But I think you also have other things that are happening in the culture where kids are overly busy during their teenage years. And so one thing that's been crowded out for a lot of teenagers is work. And there's a generation, probably 2 generations ago, maybe with the Gen Xers, who are a lot of the parents of Gen Zers, but a lot of Gen Xers, it was much more normal for you to get into high school and to start looking for a job. And a lot of, we're Gen Xers, but I know in high school, tons of my friends had jobs. And I actually wanted a job at that point. And that is not the case now with a lot of our kids, where they get into high school and there's multiple factors here. Maybe they don't want a job, right? Maybe there's a bit of laziness, so they don't want a job. But a lot of times it's just they're so busy. There's so much schoolwork and homework, and there's extracurricular activities, there's sports, and there's hobbies, and there's all these things, so that there's really no room to even fit a job. I think a lot of families would say, I don't know how my kid would even fit a job in here. And so I think that the busyness of the culture that we've pushed down into our kids' lives, that can also have an impact to where now kids are delaying getting a job, and they're delaying maybe till after college before they have their first job. So I'm thinking some of these kids, they go into an interview after they graduate from college, And it might be one of their first interviews they've ever had. And this might be the first job they're applying for. And so they haven't had, by that point, you've got your college education, your expectations for the kind of job that you're going to have is going to be higher. You're going to be thinking like, yeah, okay, I did everything I was quote unquote supposed to do. And so now I'm in position, right, to get a good job, a good paying job. But there wasn't any kind of build up to that where, hey, I was, 14 years old and I got hired by a guy at my church to go pull weeds every weekend at a couple of his commercial properties, And then or actually before that, when I was in middle school, I got a job as a paper boy where I was delivering papers in the afternoons and then going and collecting money. And then when I was 16, I got a job at, a local warehouse store and collecting carts. And I had all of these jobs and work experience and jobs that were appropriate to my level of education or training or whatever, like going and pulling the weeds. That doesn't require any kind of special skill. So there's a broad audience of workers out there that could do that. And so you don't get paid as much, but that's where I started and then worked my way up as I got skill and training, whatever. But I had multiple jobs before I ever got to jobs where I thought, okay, this is something I want to do as a career. And we may have cut that out, that whole stage of growth and development and work experience that prepares you then for the big interviews, We've cut that out of a lot of our kids' lives. And so I think that can have an impact as well.
Well, that was actually the exact thought I had. One of the first thoughts I had watching the video that we played, and also in reading another article that I want to mention. This one was from Business Insider, and it was written by a 23-year-old gal who started her first full-time job working for the YMCA in their office, it sounds like. So watching the video of the girl, and then in this article, I'm thinking, okay, who wrote this article? A 23-year-old who started her first full-time job.
This is a different girl than the video.
A different girl.
Yeah.
But I wondered the same thing. Is this the first job these gals have had? And what you're talking about, what we grew up as, what was normal to us, is that you had to work. And that started for me when I was 14. I got a job at the local swimming pool and I had to clean the locker room. So I had to scrub toilets and sweep. It was terrible. But I loved it because I had spending money now. And so I don't think as Gen X parents, we thought too much about how much this training was valuable. And so some of these young people are being thrown into a marathon, meaning full-time work. They've never had any training.
Yeah.
And we've cut out, it's just the school requires so much with homework or doing sports, so work just has to go. And we've seen it as an option. And the problem with seeing it as an option is that the young people are not trained to work. And work is a part of life. And actually, from God's point of view, it's a good part of life. It's actually good for us to work. And so from a Christian worldview, working is not an option. And as far as when it should start, well, I think definitely by the time young people are in adolescence, the connection between work and survival needs to start to be paved.
Yeah.
Like this, life is not free. And so, yeah, when you were 5, life was free and that was great. That time's over, and it's over because you
Erin
don't want.
Kunkel is a harsh mother.
That life's over because you don't want to be 5 anymore. Like you aren't content with bedtime at 7:30 and just like having play date. Like you are 16. You want to drive. You want a car. You want to go to the movies with your friends. You want to buy clothes. You want to buy shoes. All of this requires money. That's not free. And so we start to connect, of course, in small ways. It's not like, hey, 15-year-old, you need to start contributing to the mortgage. That's not what we're saying. But you do start to connect.
I might be down for that plan. I mean, that doesn't sound like a bad plan.
But you do start to connect work with life. Mm-hmm. And actually, this isn't a bad thing. Like if you go get a job at McDonald's, young person, this is actually a good thing because you're starting to see what's required to feed people or to run a business or to do what millions of Americans are doing every single day. You get to just have a taste of it when you're young. Yeah. You don't have the burden of the full-time job. That is going to come. But we're helping you work up and build those muscles. And what's happened is Gen Z has no muscles for this.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 thoughts on what you're saying. Number one, this is a great example of the way that culture powerfully shapes us. Mm-hmm. Just presents to us what is normal. And so what's happened, I mean, we're talking about back in our day, which makes us sound old, but back when we were teenagers, what was the norm? It was just kind of presented as the norm, meaning everyone around us was kind of doing it, right? And so it just seems normal, and so that's what we did. But working as a teenager was much more normal. Mm-hmm. Today, working as a teenager is abnormal. Mm-hmm. And so that is shaping our kids. But then another thing I think that was important that you said, Erin, was, you know, how those jobs we got as teenagers prepared us for the bigger jobs, the career job kind of thing. But it also made me think, yeah, and what prepared us for those teenage jobs? Working at home. In the home, having things like chores. And this is where, as I said earlier, we need to be thinking about this stuff all the way through our kids' development so that the preparation for that teenage job or whatever the first job is actually begins in the home in other ways. And so there's training and teaching that and jobs around the house appropriate to the age level that then prepare a kid to go out of the home and get a job and work at McDonald's or work at, the local grocery store or whatever it might be, that then prepares them for the next step. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great analogy, that kind of idea of running a marathon, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to go run a marathon. They've never been trained. And so then, of course, if you threw me out onto the street and told me, okay, Brett, you got to run, what is a marathon? Is it 25 miles? 26 miles.
26.2, I think.
Okay, so,
kilometers.
Okay, let's say it was 1/4 of a marathon.
26.2 miles. Yes, anyway, go ahead.
And I haven't done any training. I would sound like these students or these young people.
By mile 2, you would be like, "What? This
I'd be
isn't
saying
fun.
It is difficult. This does not feel good. It's taking up most of my life." Right? I would be complaining and upset and not wanting to quit.
Yes.
And so there is a sense where there is some grace
yes.
that we want to have with our Gen Zers.
Yes.
We got to be careful. We want to confront with truth. We also want to do that in love. And sometimes that means with warmth, and a softness and a gentleness. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to be careful that it's not just, hey, you read an article like this and you just, the younger generation, I just think of that kind of that old miser who just wants to lecture everybody. And there's a time for the lectures. There's a time for the stern warning. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, realizing, hey, maybe part of it is kind of the system that we've kind of helped put in place.
Yeah.
Maybe it's our lack of training up our young people so that this is actually to be expected given kind of the cultural waters.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is part of the seeds that we have sown with our kids that now we are reaping.
We reap what we sow in our kids' lives.
And so the reason why you make the 5-year-old clean up their own room is so that they can, when they're 10, do more than just clean up their room. And because you're teaching them, no, this is good. This is what life's about. And one in this article that was written by this 23-year-old who just started her first job, she made a statement in the article that just screamed out at me. But she says, when she's complaining about how exhausted she is after this work day, where she said she starts at 10 a.m. and gets off at 7 p.m., and so this is a full-time job. And she says, I barely have time to walk the dog and make dinner. It's already dark outside. So similar to the video we showed. But this is what she says about how depressing this life is. And then she says, that's not how humans are supposed to live. Now that's a big claim, because now she's claiming something about reality. Like, we're supposed to live one way, and we're not doing it when we work a 9 to 5 or 10 to 7 job.
Yeah.
That this is not the way we were supposed to live.
Yeah, when you hear a statement like that, right? This is not humans are supposed to live. I mean, immediately, worldview bells should go off in your head. This is a worldview statement. So there are assumptions here about the nature of human life. Our purpose. You know, we've outlined kind of the 5 big worldview questions. Any worldview that's going to be adequate to provide us guidance in life is going to have to answer at least 5 questions: origin, identity, meaning, morality, and destiny. And that's the question of meaning. What's the purpose of all this? What's the purpose of life? It's also tied into identity. Who am I? What am I? What am I for? And so there's worldview ideas underneath all of this that may be also that are fueling some of the reaction to work, because young people will often just absorb the worldview of the culture. And a secular worldview often will tell us the purpose of life is somehow tied to personal pleasure. Personal pleasure and satisfaction. And so maybe, hey, look, if you're one of those weird people who really gets pleasure and satisfaction out of your work, okay, good for you. But for most of us, work's not tied into that. Work's not tied into the kind of the meaning of life. The meaning of life is get as much pleasure as you can. And so work is simply a means to that larger end, that larger purpose. And so really the purpose of my life is aimed at pleasure, and that comes in lots of forms. It comes in good food, it comes in material goods, it comes in leisure time, it comes in nice vacations, a big house, material possessions, nice cars, all of that stuff, the quote unquote good life. But ultimately it boils down to a life of pleasurable satisfaction. Pleasure's the end goal. And that is, I think, what's lurking underneath this. And so therefore, work is not pleasurable in that sense. Work is hard, it's difficult. It takes up so much of my time, when really most of my time I want to spend it doing these other things.
Yeah, what's interesting about the gal in the video and the gal in this article, and other things I've seen too, the Gen Zers that I see complaining about work aren't necessarily saying they don't like their jobs. Actually, this gal says, oh no, I like my job at the YMCA. The one in the video said, I like my work. So they like their jobs, but it's just that it is work, that it isn't just pleasure like what you're talking about. And she goes on to say, what I love about Gen Z, her generation, she says, we see the reality of the way the world is, but we also see that there's a possibility for something better. And so she claims they have a little bit of insight here in kind of a better life. And I think what she would argue, how humans should live, because that's what she's implying when this is not the way humans are supposed to live. Gen Z has some insight in how humans should live.
Yeah, and it's actually better.
And it's better, and it means less work.
Yeah. And that's where in discussions with your kids, I mean, the questions that we've talked about, right? What do you mean by that? Those are really important questions to ask and help. Number one, it helps you to really understand where your kid's coming from, what their mindset is. And then number two, it helps them to get that stuff out on the table so they can see it for themselves. Oh, these are the ideas. This is the worldview that's operating underneath kind of these statements and these values that I have.
Yeah, because she says, hey, I want to live my life too. That's her quote. And what we have, if she was sitting here and we could ask her those questions, but what we want to do with young people is to say, okay, you said you want to live your life. I think I know what you mean by that, but explain that, because from a Christian worldview and from my own life experience, I want to live my life too, but life for me has always meant that work's included, like in that living life actually includes work, and that living life with work in it is the way we should live. And it seems like the Bible advocates that work is a part of how humans should live. So you're separating and saying work is we're not really made for that. And so as Gen Z, we think we should have more pleasure, not work time, to help balance this work time that's kind of not really good. And so you can be empathetic in, yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think you're missing, I think you're actually missing part of reality when you put work and pit it against real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also the side where some of the things that a younger generation says or what they think may actually be helpful in other generations evaluating what they grew up with as the norm. Mm-hmm. Because you have older generations who may have grown up with the idea that workaholism is okay, right? And you work yourself to death. And in fact, and many men in particular may struggle with this, right? Where they want to build something, they want to build a business, they want to build something good, but they put all their time and effort into that at the expense of their family. And so there are some Gen Zers who have grown up and maybe dad or mom have largely been absent. And what has taken them away from the family? It's been work, mm-hmm. right? And so there is also remaining teachable, even in all of this as well, and saying, hey, maybe the younger generation sees how the pendulum swung one way. Now they're swinging it back the other way. And also thinking through, okay, are there worldview ideas that are pushing us? Because, some of the, I think, trend we're seeing with now Gen Z workers, it seems to clearly represent some worldview shift. Mm-hmm. And so those are some big ideas that we need to look at. Okay, this is a big issue. This is an important issue, I think, for many of us parents, whether your kid is 2 years old or whether your kid is 22 years old. Their future work or current work or future work and job prospects and career path, that's on our mind. That weighs heavy for a lot of us, and we want to help guide our kids well. And so really, I think in this episode, we're just getting this out on the table. And this is maybe a lot of times where we have to start, right, with some cultural analysis and kind of, putting our finger up to the wind and seeing where the cultural winds are and what are the trends and where are young people and what's their mindset. So that's really what we've done today, and it's just the first start. And hopefully what this discussion has done is kind of maybe whet your appetite, really generated some interest. In fact, I want to give our listeners some homework right now, but ask your kids, hey, what do you think about work? And for this next week, just kind of get their view of work. And without lecturing them, without correcting them, maybe just sit back and really listen and see if you can't unearth your kids' view of work and what might be generating that view. Okay, so you got homework. And then what we're going to do is, because this is such an important issue, I mean, life, career, money, all of that, those are big issues of life. We're going to take some time over the next couple of weeks to really dive into this and look at it, kind of what's the starting point for us to think about our Gen Zers, our kids working. And then we'll, of course, as always, get into some practical things that we can do to start laying a foundation for a biblical view of work. Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.